Presentation, classification, and compensation study update. Ruth Ann Eledge with Segal Waters Consulting.
Come on up.
Oh, I'll just let you start. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce Ruth Ann.
Okay,
Good
thank
afternoon
you.
and happy Valentine's Day, everyone. We are so happy. A year ago today, Segal was out speaking with our department heads and our union representatives, kind of describing the scope of this project, and here we are today. We are on round 4 of our traveling road show with our presentations today. Ruth Ann is going to present the methodology and the findings to you this afternoon. Okay, so thank you, Ruth Ann, for joining us.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to be here to speak before you. What I'd like to do today is kind of bring you back up to speed about where we have been with the study, what we've done, and what we're bringing forward as our recommendations for the class and compensation study. As Karen mentioned, this has not been something we've done overnight. It's something that's been very, very thoughtful, very depth-oriented, and we've worked hard to bring to you a well-analyzed and considered report with our recommendations. So I would like to, if it's appropriate, Mr. Chair, would it be appropriate, or Ms. Chair, to bring questions as they occur? Or do you prefer to wait till the end?
Well, let's try to go ahead and get through it because they start lining up on my computer, and somebody may have a question that's different than, and I have to call them in order. So let's just go ahead and get through it. And we also know if you allow that, you're not catching any planes. I'm going to tell you right now. So we better do it the other way. Thank you.
Yeah. I was kidding my husband. I've been in here for this year and last year on Valentine's Day, and he wonders if I really want to spend the time with him. But told him I'd be home before bedtime. Well, let me start with talking about what are some of the key deliverables as a result of this study, because we've done a lot of work in many different areas, and I think it's helpful to look at what you're going to receive as a result of the study. We have had a very in-depth review of your job classifications. We analyzed data on over about 750 job titles. It's a large number of positions. Now, some of those positions the documentation was in order and we didn't need to update the information, and that was based on feedback from incumbents. But we did distribute a job questionnaire to the vast majority of employees, and I'll talk about each one of these phases individually as we go through the presentation. We designed and conducted a job analysis through a job description questionnaire that was very involved with employees participating and completing. So that was in itself a significant effort to get that questionnaire out to all the employees and go through a process of collection from not only themselves but from their supervisors and managers. So that was a key deliverable. Another one was the actual compensation survey. We conducted a custom survey to collect data on an extensive amount of not only direct pay but benefits, retirement, pay practices, all of total compensation, and that was done in a very thoughtful way too with a significant number of peer employers. So it included the benefits data, comparabilities, as well as salaries and pay practices. So as the data came in, we did comparisons to you, and you'll see in the final report when you have a chance to look at it. It'll be posted tonight online, so everybody will have an opportunity to see it. All the individual comparisons of your benefits, your programs compared to what your comparable employers are doing. As a result of the data collection and analysis, we have now made recommendations on new classifications. Now, we understand that this is our recommendations, and the county will still need to go forward with their normal process of bargaining and discussions with the appropriate groups. But the recommendations that you are seeing is based on our analysis of the job documentation, our understanding of what are comparable titles that are being used so that when you continue to market price, you'll have similar comparisons. And we've recommended a new class structure that does, in some cases, collapse titles into one because there were positions that had different titles but doing very similar or the same work. And it also has a recommendation for an updated compensation plan, and those are pay structures and pay data and pay guidelines. So in that vein of thought, to get to there, we've created the class structure, the compensation plan, and we've also developed what we call a job evaluation system. When you conduct a study of this nature, you can't collect market data on every individual job. For one thing, not everybody has the positions organized the same way that you do. And if we're doing a custom survey where we're actually trying to match to your positions, you have to select what I would call a representative group of benchmark jobs. So the question then becomes, how do you map the other jobs that you don't have market data on to the market data? And we developed a job evaluation system that I'll explain in a few more minutes that looks at 8 key characteristics of positions, compares every job to those characteristics, rates them on those, and then you can identify common responsibilities among jobs across the county. So then you can begin to map jobs that have similar characteristics to the market data so that every position is evaluated and market priced by applying that data countywide. Okay? So that was a very important step, to have that job evaluation system in place to look at the internal relationships of jobs. We then, after we updated the class structure and the recommended titles, have updated job descriptions for the county's consideration. And as part of this process, we've also looked at, under the Fair Labor Standards Act, those jobs that have been exempted from overtime based on the criteria under the Fair Labor Standards Act, and made sure that there is appropriate documentation that justifies and provides the rationale for exemption from overtime. You don't have a lot of jobs, but it's important that your job documentation support that. Finally, you'll see that we're recommending consolidating your pay structures to simplify and provide internal pay equity, and we'll get to that in a little bit when we get to that slide. And then all this has been put together in a final report that documents the methodology and the findings and recommendations. So that's what you're going to have as a result of this study. And I wanted to walk through each one of the phases of the study to kind of give you more detail what we did to conduct the class analysis or to conduct the market analysis. So the first step we did take was the job analysis and classification structure update. To kick that off, because you do have so many job titles, we wanted to collect data directly from employees about the work that they're performing. And so initially we were on site for 3 days conducting employee briefings and many, many meetings. I don't remember the actual count, but there were at least 6 to 8 per day over those 3 days, or perhaps more. And we met with employees and said, here's the job questionnaire, here's how to fill it out, here's what the study's trying to accomplish, tell us what you're doing so that when we conduct this analysis and do this market pricing, we're using the actual work that's being performed here at Macomb County as our point of comparison. So we collected job questionnaires. We actually had 509 job questionnaires that were completed. This in no way represents the number of employees, because we encouraged employees to get together in groups if they were doing the same job and complete what I call a group or a joint questionnaire. So many of these questionnaires may represent 6, 8 employees together completing one questionnaire. So but we had 509 individual job questionnaires, and we analyzed all that in addition to other documentation that had been provided to us on other jobs, and came back and spent 3 days interviewing incumbents in those titles if we weren't clear about what is the real scope of this position and what is different between this job and another job. I'd actually quantifying and evaluating what are the key characteristics that differ from one level to the next in a career family, or between jobs that are being performed across departments. So that effort then resulted in what we call a recommended class structure. And in that recommended class structure, we documented all the key characteristics, the essential functions, the physical requirements of the positions, so that you now had in one place a large documentation that provided all that key data. That then resulted in the update of your of your job descriptions, and it was the location that we also documented your work that allows that position to be exempted from overtime, if it was recommended or was it retained as exemption from overtime status. One of the things that we did do in this process was consolidate some positions. There are some jobs where there was incumbents across departments that were doing the same or very similar work, and we recommended that they be consolidated into one job title. The clerical titles is one example. I think we had over 32 titles that was being used across departments for clerical positions. And so our recommendation is to classify those jobs based on job content and job responsibility and consolidate them down so that you have people that are doing the same work being called the same title. Okay. That is an example. We also, in our work, we were looking at job families and career ladders and making sure that we had a distinguishing characteristic from one level to the next so that employees understood what they would have to do to progress in their career family. So this is all part of the class analysis and what our recommendations are leading to. Finally, we did bring forward title definitions or a titling protocol so that when we used a title, it was consistently used across the county. For example, what is a specialist? What is an analyst? What is a supervisor? What is a lead? What is a coordinator? So that we're consistently applying that title across the county. That is all what has been provided to you as a result of the classification analysis, along with recommendations for title changes, or in some cases even creation of new titles, because we found incumbents in a job title that were doing something very different than what all the other incumbents were doing, and we felt like a new title should be created for that position. So the class analysis and class structure has resulted in recommendations for title changes if there are some. And there are many jobs that are not having recommendations for title changes, but there are some. And old title, new title, and then a titling protocol, documentation on all your positions, and updated job descriptions. Just a note about the job evaluation tool that it will now stay in the hands of HR, and they will continue to manage that system. It is a Excel spreadsheet that has been custom developed within formulas and all of the lookup tables to provide a tool that the county can continue to use so that they can evaluate new jobs, or if a job has changed and it needs to be reevaluated, the factors have changed, they can continue to use that over time. But basically what it does is it looks at 8 characteristics or compensable factors, and you can see those listed here in this slide: education, experience, responsibility for oversight of employees, interactions or human collaborations, independent discretion or freedom to act and impact of those actions, the depth of knowledge or technical skill that a position is required to have, its involvement in the financial matters of the county, and the working conditions. And the working conditions relates to not only physical demand, but also environment in which that work must be performed, because there are many jobs that are in either hazardous or very unpleasant or difficult positions where it affects the way the work is being performed. So every position has been evaluated on each one of these factors. It is a point factor system, and so once you have determined the rating for that position, you can then calculate a total point value for the position, and then look at jobs that have similar point values to be able to group them within a very small range of points. Okay? And that is the approach that we're using to provide a very quantitative approach to grouping jobs that have similar qualities together and then bringing in the market data for those groups of positions and applying it across the county. Okay? Again, this does coexist with market. This is only internal equity review, internal job review. When you bring in the market value, sometimes market does disagree with your internal placement, and the county can make a decision about which factor will be more driving, the market data or the internal relationship of that job with other positions. Okay. So that's basically the full classification analysis. Wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the market assessment, which was one of the other key deliverables of the study. When you conduct a market assessment, and this was a fairly substantial study because it had so many data points that were being collected, there's a couple of key decisions that you need to make. And the first one is, if you're going to have a representative group of benchmark jobs that is going to be applied across the county to the rest of the positions, how do you select those positions? And there is a statistical analysis that Segal Waters conducts up front, looking at where all the jobs are, even what unions they're associated with, what bargaining units they're associated with, what level they're within the organization, how many incumbents are in individual titles, to be able to recommend a group of positions that we think statistically represents the entire organization and can be used to make conscious decisions on pay for those jobs. So we conducted that analysis and we recommended 96 job titles. Now, one of the things that we did when we had done our initial analysis is that we then sat down with all the department directors and the bargaining units and said, we think 100 job titles approximately will represent your workforce. We think that number is reasonable to expect another employer to respond to a survey. In our experience, if you get past 100 job titles, it never makes it to the desk to be completed because it's just so substantial. So we selected 100 job titles, ran that by your union reps and your department directors. There was a consensus that these titles would sufficiently represent the organization. And in fact, these job titles do reflect 56% of your total incumbents across the county. So it's a good, strong representation of the actual employee base. So those job titles were then defined in a summary. A summary of the job content was written up in the survey document itself and was used to collect market data on. The second question became who do you compare yourselves to? Who are you going to invite or ask to participate in this survey? And again, we did an analysis using criteria: who is close by, proximity, who has similar types of services, similar types of positions, who has a similar type of organizational structure, so that we can collect relevant market data. We started out with a large number of comparator employers, met again with the unions and the bargaining associations, our bargaining reps and the department directors, and we came up with 10 employers that we think would provide data from public sector. This did not include the private sector data that we brought in from our published private sector sources. So you have these 10 employers that we invited to participate in the survey. As you can see, 2 of them chose not to participate, but the other 8 did, and we were able to collect good, strong data from the 8 employers that you see here listed on the sheet. Then we brought in the published private sector data from our data library and regionalized it to the Michigan region in this area. And from those employers, we collected not only salary range data, but also pay practices, such as how they progress through the ranges, how they create their ranges, what kinds of pay adjustments are being made, but also any type of specialty pay differentials, shift diff, longevity. All of those questions were asked if they provide those kinds of different types of pay. Additional benefit offerings, anything else that they might do, special incentives, or any type of, perhaps they may have tuition reimbursement or any type of wellness programs, those kinds of things. And then paid time off. We asked for their schedules for accrual rates, what types of paid time off they provided, and including vacation, sick leave, holidays, any type of special arrangements for time off, and compared your policy to theirs. And then finally, health and benefits. We were looking at medical plans, which included health plans, which included dental, medical, vision, and the different levels of coverage within each one of those plans, and the type of plan that they were offering as well. So as you can see from this, there was a lot of information that has been collected. And in fact, someone asked me earlier how big the report is, and I know it's well over 300 pages, and I can't even tell you the number of tables we have in it that analyzes the data and provides it to you, so that you'll have a chance to look at it. And you can see the different approaches that other employers are using to provide compensation, total compensation to their employees. Again, the peers all received the custom survey. We wrote job summaries. We asked them to match to the job summary, not the job title. And then we went back and validated their responses if we had any questions about, was this a good match? Did this really represent what you are providing here with the county? So it was a very thoughtful, it was a very in-depth review of the data, And we've, HR has reviewed it as well, and we're very comfortable that the matches that were made and the data collected is relevant for your use. One important note is that this data was all collected as of July 1, 2017, so all of our analysis is based on that point in time. Okay? So if there's been any actions that have occurred here at the county, the analysis that we have conducted was based on the position of the county in July of 2017. Overall, and this is a big, broad statement, overall, your pay structures, your pay ranges were competitive at entry and at midpoint, but were lagging at the top step. So the pay potential for the employees here at Macomb County overall appeared to be lagging compared to your peer employers. But as you know, when you look at a broad level, it's also important to kind of do a deeper dive and go in and look at individual jobs. And so we have identified individual benchmark jobs. Of those 96, you can see that some are leading, some are lagging, and some are at market. And we use a tolerance of plus or minus 5% of the market midpoint as our point of reference in that analysis. So we found that any position that was below 95% of market we identified as lagging. Any position that was over 105% was leading, and any position that was within plus or minus 5% was at market. Okay. So about 1/3 of your jobs were at market that we surveyed. This is of the benchmark jobs. Another 1/3 of them were below market. 16 were above. And there were 15 jobs we found that didn't have at least 3 matches. While we reported the data in the analysis, we didn't use it if it didn't have at least 3 matches. That's our threshold for standard or for validating statistical comparison of that position. What we found is that some other employers outsource some of their services, particularly in roads and bridges, and sometimes in the social and medical and health services. So a lot of these positions are those positions. And then there are some jobs where other employers are just organized differently. They just don't have their work organized like yours, and so didn't have a match for that position. So on the next several pages, you're going to see the charts that reflect groups of jobs and the individual benchmark jobs that have been assigned to that group, and the actual overall market relationship for that individual benchmark position. And it's to enhance or to enable you to quickly identify jobs that are above or below market. You'll see that those that are below market at a data point are in red, and those that are above in blue, and those that are within that plus or minus 5 tolerance at market in black. So you'll see the first comparison, or the first sheet is showing you, for example, the courts and probation jobs that were grouped in that category. I want to point out something that is really important to notice when you're looking at market data. In this particular slide, I want to point out the court administrator and the court reporter, those your court positions. What we found is we were able to match jobs that had the district court, but they didn't have the circuit like you do. So your job actually is a greater position than what was reported from the other employers. So when you look at this data and you see, oh my gosh, that one is at 142%, I'm not so sure that that's not an appropriate relationship compared to what your job does here and what the other positions do. But that's a decision you can make, and that's something that I think as you go through this data and look at it and see how it compares, you have to do that additional analysis to make sure you're comfortable with how you apply this data to your positions. Okay, so you can see then here all the positions that we categorized under court. You can see the general average below for the court positions. Then the engineering or scientific was the second job category that you see here that includes your engineers and engineer tech and your wastewater position. Again, there's several pages of this, so I'm going to keep scrolling through them, and you'll be able to see these in depth as long as you want to, because this is going to be posted for everyone to be able to look at. You'll see the executive management team is the next group of positions that we categorized, and where they are in terms of the market relationship. The facilities maintenance, below that, you can see that almost every position in that we had market data on is lagging at maximum, and some are at midpoint and entry as well. Your general administrative, clerical, and office services, you can see the job titles there. The administrator county mental health, we removed that position because as we began to look at how these other organizations are structured, the data that they were giving us was just not matching, and they were organized very differently. So we pulled that job from the comparability study. But you can see the others that have remained in that grouping. Okay. Health and social services, you can see there, this is one of the areas where many of the other employers maybe have outsourced this to a health authority or to a social service, other social service programs to do outside of the county. So there were several positions here that we did not have sufficient matches for. Human resources, IT, and legal were the next 3 job groups. Okay. This is straight data. You can see all the individual responses when you look at the final report. The next group is other professionals, and you can see that's a grouping of different jobs that are in the professional ranks. Public safety, both sworn and civilian. Semi-skilled and skilled trades and utilities. Again, you see in the skilled trades quite a few that are lagging. And at the bottom, you'll see the overall average. So that's why you can see the overall average, how it's calculated. But if you look at it individually, you can see that there are certainly some areas that need some attention to be able to bring them into a more market competitive position to the market, relation to the market. So I wanted to say a little bit about the pay practices and benefits. There's an extensive amount of data collected on this. I think one of the things that when I report what are to me the outstanding things of notice that I want to talk about, one of them is that in general the county is actually in pretty good shape compared to your peer employers in terms of pay practices and pay policies. The accrual rates, one of the things I found to be very competitive is the leave program. You have a very generous leave program. If you look at your accrual rates compared to others, as well as the other types of off leave time, holidays, sick leave, carryover time, cash, all that is very generous compared to other employers. The health benefits, if you look at those, you'll see that in general, your health costs are higher than other entities. And while we didn't do a detailed review of design, it appears that you have a very strong health benefits program that provides employees with a very good plan. You have 2 types of plans that are most often used by employees. And in all cases, generally your premiums are higher that you're paying for than other employers. So in a way that can be a good thing because your employees are benefiting from that, but you are paying more than what the others are. And in terms of the retirement, most of them have moved to the defined contribution plan versus the defined benefit. 3 of them are still retaining as their primary the defined benefit, but they basically looks to be migrating to that. And the contributions are ranging anywhere from 4 to 8%. I think you're at 6. So, but those were what I would call key findings or what might be notable to present to you. So when you come to the final piece of the study and our recommendations, and I know this will be a culture change as well, and you may choose or not to move forward using this approach. But it seems that 4 pay structures would meet your needs in terms of how to organize your jobs and how to organize your pay ranges. One that includes your professional, technical, administrative positions, another one for your executive, your management executive. There are part-time positions that should have a range of pay that is assigned to them, and then there are some jobs that are basically flat rate, and that is matching up with how the market is paying those positions as well. So those 4 structures should be used or recommended for use to streamline and to simplify your pay system and provide that internal pay equity as well as external equity. We think that as you move forward, having a implementation that includes all employees helps make this equally distributed to everyone, and that you should keep your step approaches. Right now, you have steps, but depending on the pay range you're in the bargaining unit, you may have different step sizes or different step frequencies and so forth. And so trying to normalize or trying to be more consistent, I think would be very beneficial in terms of how to administer and how to provide some internal fairness and equity. And then finally, I think once you implement whatever it is that you do end up implementing, you need to continue to manage it and care for it, because market will not stop. Market will continue to move, and as market moves, you need to monitor it and update your structure so that you can maintain the relationship to market that you established with the initial adoption. And that is not to say we're suggesting you do another study like this every 2 years. That's usually only done every 5 to 7 years. Typically what you'll do is you'll agree on key published sources of data, such as World at Work or some of the others that are recognized in the field of compensation, track market changes within your region, and then determine what adjustments you want to make to your structures with informed decisions and data that you feel is reliable. So I'm going to, do you want to go on to next steps, or do you want to stop here and see? Okay. So really the next steps is to have everybody review the report, look at the presentation again, because it'll be posted. We know that there's a 2019 wage reopener and negotiations, and all of this has to go through that. But we also want people to get their questions answered, and so there's been an email address set up so that employees, once they begin to look at the report and have questions, and they didn't ask them today, that they can get those answered in the future. So I will stop here and answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Commissioner Drillette.
Really, I just pushed the button. I'm first. All right. Just a couple. Well, first off, is it Eledge?
That's right.
Thank you so much for your excellent presentation, the work you did on this report. Just a couple quick questions. Did you weight in any manner the comparisons? Like, were some of the comparisons more closely aligned than others? So, for example, if you look at, I don't know, a cashier or a computer maintenance person, and somebody in Oakland County had that position, and their job was a little more similar than somebody at Home Depot, doing that position or something. Was there weighting of the similarities in any way? And how many private sector comparisons were you able to use compared to the public sector ones?
So a couple of things. Our standard for comparing in the custom survey is we have to have what we call predominant comparability. So if we feel like it has, we call it the 80% rule. It's not an exact calculation, but it is predominant match using minimum qualifications and job responsibilities. That's why we write the job summary. Then we'll use that. If we feel it's a high or low match, we could take that into consideration, but typically our standard is it has to be predominantly the same job. So that's how we evaluate the custom survey data. The private sector data, again, they have descriptors of work, and we pulled in data just from this region because it is a national database, but we adjusted it to this region, to the Detroit metropolitan area in this part of the state. So it's even broader than Detroit. But we wanted to look at similar types of work that is based on skill sets and minimum quals, because they're not exactly doing the same thing, but you're looking for skill requirements and requirements for entry into that position. So I don't know if that answers your question.
If there's suppose you look at the market data for the private sector and it shows electricians, broadly speaking, are compensated X, and then you look, does it weigh equally with the electricians that are doing
we
X
did.
in Wayne County or Oakland County?
Well, what we did is you see all the public sector data accumulated and compared together. Then you'll see another analysis that has just the private sector data accumulated and gathered. So you'll see what it is in the public sector, what it is in the private sector, and then another aggregate analysis at the bottom, which is weighted 50-50.
Okay.
Okay.
Another two more quick questions, if I could, Madam Chair. You mentioned at one point that it was difficult to make some comparisons because some comparable organizations had outsourced some of the jobs and that sort of thing. Did you look at the outsourced jobs and use those as comparables if they're doing the same thing?
So we did not. Segal did not. Now, I think HR was going to follow up with gathering data from those because that was not within the scope of our project. So what we did is we gathered data through the custom survey, everyone who had matching jobs. And not every employer matched every position because everybody is structured a little bit differently. And so that's why our minimum standard of matching is at least 3 matches, because we knew that not all A would match every position.
Okay, so was it just impossible to get the data for those outsourced jobs from the people that they had outsourced it to?
I think the agreement was that HR was going to follow up with that because we had not, that was additional data gathering and it wasn't within the scope of our project, but they were going to follow up with some of their data. I think that was the agreement, yeah. So they're collecting that data.
Okay, and the last quick question is, when we saw the charts with some of the jobs in red and some in blue and some in black, was that looking at the pay specifically or total compensation including benefits?
That was at pay. That was pay only. What you'll see in the report is a offering by offering comparison for every data category that we collected. So you'll see, it was not a total compensation analysis.
Is there a way for us to find that? Because it could be that some bargaining units emphasize benefits more than pay compared to some others. They might want additional time off or whatever it might be.
I mean, and Segal does that type of analysis. That was just not what we had been asked to do for this particular study.
Okay, but you did find that there are. You did look at some level at our non-salary compensation. Okay.
We did. So, for example, let's just use healthcare. So, what we did is we looked at, first of all, we said, let's talk about your medical plan. What medical plan do you have? And you have all your medical plans and the premiums at each type of offering. And then asked each of the employers in the custom survey to tell us what their medical plan was, and for each one of those offerings, the different categories, employee only, whatever. And then we did a comparison of their premiums to your premium. So it's not done by individual employee or position, but you can see how your premiums compare for each one of those levels of offerings.
So there is a way to look both at the salaries and the benefits as far as comparisons.
In fact, it's done on every data category for each one of them. Leave. What is your leave policy? It has accrual rates at these years, and here's how much you accrue at each year, and there's an analysis in comparison to every one of those, how your leave accruals compare to theirs. So each of those are provided for you to see how you compare. How many holidays do you give? What other types of time off do you have? How's your sick leave compare? All of that is provided an individual analysis offering by offering to you.
Okay. Thank you. That answers my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Leonetti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there any way you can go back on your slide presentation? I just want to reference something very specific under your summary of findings. In fact, it would be the very first page when we compared the court administration and I believe court reporters.
Oops, here we go. Sorry. There we go.
Okay, so this is kind of a specific question in terms of the methodology. And I didn't want to ask you while you were giving your presentation. You did indicate that the court administrator, as we compared that position, it was compared to a district court. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then you indicated, at least my notes indicated, you also said the same thing of the court reporter. Is that correct too?
Well, the court reporter really is primarily their job is changing. It's evolving.
Yes, it
and
is,
I think it's only fair to say that your job is changing to something different than what we're seeing in some of the other courts. Just like your administrator has a broader responsibility. It's only to kind of note that when you look at this data, you have to really think about how to apply it to your positions and how comparable it is. For the most part, we've done all of that, but there are some of these that we've had conversations with HR about how when we're making recommendations on application of it, we're looking at that so that we're not going to reduce this range of pay at all, because we think that, in our recommendations, we've taken into consideration that it's different. While the data is useful, you have to apply it in a way that recognizes you have higher responsibilities here.
Well, let me. I'm a little bit confused by your answer.
Okay.
When you say the position of court reporter is changing, the idea would be that there's video. Is that what you're factoring in? That in some cases now the courts are using video?
They're using different tools and different equipment to conduct their work. Yeah.
So that, as it relates to a court reporter, I can understand that. Are there any other of these classifications? Because it sounds to me like that's another variable you're using, is the potential of that job changing. So, for example, a clerk who used to maybe have to type everything now is going to be scanning everything. Right. Are you saying a lot of these other positions, when we look at this number here, when you say 143%, it's factoring in the potential that the position is going to change, albeit for...
We only know of a few of those.
Okay.
These two were some of the few. I think there's one other that's in health, where the private sector data for the position, the health officer, really was too low of a match. We went ahead and reported it and showed it, but again, you'll see that position is also leading significantly. But those are the three that actually we looked at. All the rest of these are straight-on comparisons.
Okay. I want to then scroll to your page where you have your summary of your findings. Was that the broad statement, as you said?
Oh, is it earlier or later?
I think it was towards the end of this
Okay.
this findings. Was your statement. It was a statement that said we're at the high end. We're
Okay, here we go.
right there.
Yeah.
Overall.
Okay.
So my question here is this, and it may be beyond. Obviously, you collect the data. I don't know what you look at in terms of the analysis, but one of the concerns that I've seen being up here in a year is that we have a lot of very talented people at the top that are soon going to be retiring, or maybe because now that we're lagging at the range maximum, are actually leaving and going to a different different employer. Do you see that as being a problem for us? I mean, in other words, it looks from what you're saying here is market competitive at the range minimum. Does that mean that somebody entry level, we're going to be able to recruit entry level people a lot easier than we're going to be able to retain talented people who've been with us for a while? Is that what this statement is saying in a sense?
What this tells me is that you probably have more difficulty retaining some of these positions than hiring, particularly if your hiring guidelines allow you some flexibility to hire in. And that's typically what we would suggest is you have a range entry that is based on minimum qualifications for that position with very little experience beyond the minimum quals.
Okay.
But your range maximums, the potential for continued movement is where you're really seeing consistently, you saw the numbers that were highlighted in red, where you're really not, I think that's you'll either have people that leave, go someplace else, or they may not even take the job if they feel like they're
right, and that's
they're
the
not going to
concern.
be able to make as much. Yeah.
Commissioner Segal over there will
Yeah.
talk. I see he's on there, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but he'll tell you that the sheriff's department, we have trouble getting a lot of new recruits out of the academies because they see the entry level is extremely low, and they can go over to Washtenaw County or they can go to Oakland County as a sheriff and earn more than they do here in Macomb. But it sounds to me, based on this statement, not only do we have the problem if they do come to us, But it sounds like if they stay with us after a couple of years, they're going to start looking around and going, boy, I can make more if I go over there.
For some positions, that's true.
Okay. Did you see, and I just looked at the chart now that you presented it to us, do you, and again, this may be beyond your pay grade in terms of your analysis, but do you see us having a problem where we have a lot of talent based on this that could leave? That would be a real problem for us if we had a lot of talented people that are at the top now taking off and going someplace else, and we're stuck with a lot of folks that don't have experience having to fill those positions. Do you see this based on your statement as a possible bubble?
I think it ranges among your jobs. You saw that there were, that's why we group jobs into categories. So, for example, and it also depends on the availability within your labor pool, because we did a study for, I guess, Grand Rapids not too long ago, and they showed that they actually were doing okay with their skilled trades, but they're growing so quickly, and they're having, and the labor pool is so tight that they're taking that data and they're using it to bench up where they know that they can be more competitive at the local level. Okay. So I think that's the point I'm trying to make with this data is it's very useful to make conscious decisions about how you want to apply it to your workforce. If you know you're having difficulty with the sworn positions, or if you know you're having difficulty with the trades, or with your other IT, for example, then I think knowing what other people are paying, knowing what your issues are, you can apply that data in a way that allows you to position yourself making conscious decisions. It's not just, where do I need to be? Here's what we're hearing from these others. How am I going to apply that to my workforce?
One last question. I know you indicated that at certain points you reclassified positions. You took a look at some positions and thought, part-time, full-time. One of the things that has come up for us recently are 1099 positions. Did you look in the course of your analysis and data gathering, do we have any positions that are 1099 that potentially the IRS could say, hey, this is really a county employee? Did you come across any of that type of
We didn't really do an analysis of that, but I didn't see anything. But
okay.
We weren't targeting that either.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ruth Ann, thank you for your report. It was very thorough. I'm going to just go on with what Commissioner Drolet was saying, because I had some questions regarding, you said that we were above the average on accrual rates, so paid time off, vacation time, sick time, and then that we paid a higher portion of health care benefits. Is there something in your report that allows us to adjust for that? Because obviously to some people that's worth more than making a little more money, having a little more time off. So I'm wondering how you merge all of that in at some point to say, well, you're making 95% of the average, however, you get 3 more days off a year or something like that, because it does make a difference. Sure. And we can't just always look at money. So I'm wondering what in your calculations.
So unfortunately, there's not a calculation to use for things like that. But I think what we typically see is you begin to see just how far ahead your accrual rates are, or how much higher your benefits costs are. And then you begin to take that into consideration as you go into your bargaining discussions. Right. And you use that as part of your negotiations. And I'm not getting into bargaining strategy because I'm not part of that. Right. But that's what we'll see other clients do.
Got it.
And take that as part of their discussions.
And I understand that. I just didn't know if you had any
no, there's not a
numbers that might equate to different things like that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sauger.
Do you have the reason why the city of Warren didn't take part in this survey?
It wasn't for lack of asking, because we spent quite a bit of time not contacting them and trying to encourage them. In fact, we know that this was an onerous survey to complete. We offered everybody the results of this, a summary of the results. They're not going to get anything near like what you have, but so that they would have something to benefit from participating in the survey. So we did not, I think it was more to do with how extensive the survey was, but I'd have to go back and look at my notes, what they exactly said. But we contacted them several times and had lengthy discussions, I think, at that time with Eric about trying to contact them and get them to participate.
Okay, and back to the comment Commissioner Leonardi made about the Sheriff's Department. Part of the reason is the guys are picked to go to the academy. And then when they get into the academy, they're conversing with other guys in all different departments. How much are you going to make? How much are you going to make? So once they find this out, they get their passing grade at the academy, and then they can apply at these different departments. So, and you can't stop it. You can't have them sign a form, and that's just the way nature of things. So whoever pays the most is going to get the most.
Right, and I do think that at least now you know what these others are paying. But there's other factors that do affect decisions about, certainly you have to have a competitive rate of pay, and you want to be in the ballpark with the others, but sometimes it has to do with geographic area and, where they live and what kind of department you have and, the reputation of the department. All of those things are part of what, someone takes into consideration. But you have to have a competitive rate of pay to be in the ballpark with them.
Thank you. Commissioner Toko.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you have any tests to validate this study? I mean, is there anything that can test the validity of your study?
Let me think about that. Is the data accurate? Is that what you're saying, or is the?
I mean, just the sample that you used and the questions that you asked. I mean, I noticed that all of the positions, the county positions, weren't considered in the study. Right. So it looks like you selected certain positions and excluded other positions.
Correct. Standard compensation or best practice compensation for the number of jobs that you have and the size of your workforce is to try to represent at least 20% of your employees in a survey, 20%. And so having represented over half your employees in the data that is collected is far beyond best practice standards in compensation analysis. Would it be nice to have data on every position? You betcha. But applying data like we have allows you to do it in a way that administratively it's manageable, and it also does allow you, if you decide to try to refresh the data, and you will have an access database that all that information is in, that if HR chooses to go in and update that, you can, so it can continue to do those same reports and comparisons that you've had in the past. But in terms of validating the data, we went through with a fine-tooth comb at each data response and evaluated if we felt like it was accurate, comparable, and reliable data.
Okay, so there's no independence test that can test the validity of your results?
Not without doing another survey and to validate it. Now, we've done other studies in Michigan, and we see similar types of responses, but then they don't all have the same comparable employers. So if you're going to validate it, you'd have to use the same source of information to validate.
And how did you decide which positions you would consider and which ones you wouldn't? And I'll tell you why I ask. I noticed when we were going through that friend of the court referees were not considered. And we had some referees come to the board and make representations that they were underpaid based on our adjoining counties. And I didn't see that one in there. And I'm wondering how you picked which positions you would consider as part of the study and which ones were excluded.
So when I was talking about doing a statistical analysis of your workforce, that was a methodology that we used. We actually had a download of every position you have here, where it was located, what range of pay it was in, what bargaining unit it was a member of, whether it was exempt or non-exempt. We looked at all of those factors and pulled out jobs that statistically represented those different groups. So I don't remember friend of the court specifically, but again, then we ran it by all the bargaining units, the representatives, as well as department directors, and got a consensus agreement that this group of positions would represent the county.
Okay. So there was somebody else that looked, the bargaining units did look into
yeah.
it? Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. First of all, I guess to the chair, do we receive this summary electronically yet, or do we have this? No, or the actual study? Will we?
It's online on the website,
This,
internet and the intranet, correct.
okay, thank you. And also the actual study itself, will we have access to take a look? Okay. Thank you. I guess the next step is for HR and the Executive's Office to take this information, dive deep, and make those decisions. So I appreciate the information that you have brought forth. Now, I guess it comes down to this board did make a kind of a statement to, at least I know I did, to during budget times. There were some positions being asked for, and we said we're going to wait until this showed up. Well, you got some more work before that comes up to us, so we're doing it the right way. So I guess direction from HR as far as the process that you're going to let everybody know, or the Executive's Office, as far as the timing is going to be here for these departments to come forward, because I don't want them to think that we're slow in the roll, to put it in a better term. It's a process, and if that can be communicated to those department heads, it would be greatly appreciated on my end. And then my question is not for you, and I apologize, is for HR. What is your next step in this process?
During our meetings this morning and this afternoon, we made it very clear to our department heads and our bargaining representatives that we haven't even scratched the surface of this report, and that we needed to work with the Executive Office and Finance to kind of look at what this really means. Lots of questions on when we could get to the table, and we told them fall. So late summer, early fall. It's just an incredible amount of information.
I
The report
understand.
is, Amy, 300 pages? 252 pages. Wow. So just an incredible amount of information to go through.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, and if you can keep the board kind of abreast as to the status of the process of where you're at. This is good information. Now, again, what we do with it. The next part of that is I see the compensation. There was a lot of discussion on that portion of it. The classification part now. Is this, and again, bear with me in this process of asking these questions, are they going to be assisting in that classification?
That has to be bargained. The tool is there.
Okay.
Segal Waters has developed a wonderful tool to help us identify where classifications need to be, but all that
Okay, and
needs
that,
to be bargained.
so that goes into your bargaining process. Okay,
Absolutely.
that's what,
Yep, absolutely.
okay, all right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Duche.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So far, pretty impressive. You seem to have done your homework, and you've put in a lot of time. If it's 252 pages, I'm looking forward to trying to go through some of this. You said originally there were 750 classifications in the county, and I understand that bargaining and so on and so forth. Is there anything in this study that tells us that we need less than 750 classifications?
We have recommended some consolidation of titles and reduction in number of job titles, yes.
Okay. To what number? Is it
I don't know how
100,
much of-
90? There are a number
Well,
of,
let me give you an example. We had,
I think it's so complicated,
yeah.
and there's so many recommendations that, again, all that has to come out through.
Well, okay, then that's fair. That's
Yeah.
also fair.
Yeah. I mean,
I think 750 is outrageous.
right. It's definitely difficult to manage. No
It's next to impossible. But if we can not, if there's recommendations on knocking down the amount of classifications, that'd be perfect. Thank you. Next question. Did you consider county structure in any of this? You had us that are an executive charter, Wayne County that was executive charter, I think I saw Genesee County and a couple other counties that are not executive driven. Did that make a difference in any of your computations or deliberations?
So when we match positions, we match job content and job requirements. So we're looking at what does this job do? And so indirectly, it is driven by the structure because you may do things differently because of your structure here versus somewhere else. But did we do an analysis of that? No, we did not.
Okay.
But what we did is said, if you have a job that does this and has requirements that are the same or similar to ours, we want to know what data you use to pay for that position.
So you really didn't get into levels of administration, if you will?
Well,
Or did that kind of?
it was taken into consideration because of how the job summaries were written. So this position is responsible for supervision of a group of employees or for a division or for, so you would get that level of review.
Okay.
But you wouldn't get an in-depth analysis of how the jobs compare in terms of structure.
All right. Last question. Is the data that you collected from here is obviously area specific. Is there a multiplier or something that you use for, let's say, Macomb County versus Genesee County versus, let's say, Cleveland, Ohio, Cleveland type area?
Well,
Or New York, San Francisco?
if we were going to go to someplace like that, we would certainly put in a geographic adjuster for differences in cost of labor.
All right.
So we, if you go to New York, you're going to,
Sure.
yeah, you'd have to do that. So yeah, there is geographic differentials between the locations.
Was it significant in the study that you did?
I don't remember them being significant. Of course, I'm looking at Amy because she has poured over this data as much as I have, but I don't remember it. It was just a few percentage points at the most.
Okay, then it's...
So it was not what I would call significant.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And before I continue, I'm going to go ahead and seek the motion to receive and file. Moved by Commissioner Lucido, supported by Commissioner Carabelli. Okay, I'm up on, so I think my question is for Executive Delden. Hi.
That's not me.
He's like, what? No, I didn't come for this. So now that we have this, and I think we all knew this was coming, do you see maybe your office putting some sort of policy in place that administrators during budget don't come before us requesting reclassification of individuals for their pay to go up? You know how when pay wasn't taking place, I think that's how we ended up with so many jobs, was this person would come and say, well, we're not giving a pay raise, we're reclassifying the individual. So do you see some sort of policy put in place that if we're going to have set pay, set positions, and that's our end game, that we're going to put an end to that?
Yeah, at the early part of the study, and I actually slid over to slide 4, which should be in front of you, and I did it without messing up. One of the important things of this analysis is it's leaving human resources and labor relations with a job evaluation tool to do exactly what you're talking about, Commissioner Kleinfeld. So it's going to be a very helpful tool as we move forward and we get asked for upgrades to positions. But this is merely a guide, but for us in human resources, it's a very important tool that we're going to use out into the future. Whether or not we can afford to implement everything that's in here is yet to be determined. And that's why the Steves are here to be part of this representation today. So they've got a lot of work to do, but this is a guide, it's a tool. Even if we had the wherewithal to implement everything that's in here, it still has to be bargained through the collective bargaining process, and that is to be determined. And with 26 or 28 different collective bargaining agreements, we might get different results with different groups. So
Okay.
There's a
and-
lot of work ahead of us.
And we've got two different groups. We've got the county-wides, which in and of itself might be a whole different discussion, and I'm not sure. And then we have the department heads that really work directly for the county exec's office. And I look at this and I think about companies and I think, should the decision of what those positions are titled be coming out of HR as opposed to be coming out of individual departments? And I don't know if the answer is different for county-wides and for other department heads, or if the answer is the same. But you see what I'm saying? There's been years where I'm just wondering, is that a function that belongs to HR, generally speaking? We won't speak county specific. Let's do it that way. Do you think that's a function of HR, generally speaking, to determine job classifications?
Generally speaking, yes, but the challenge, not the challenge, but you should know that the current job titles are in the collective bargaining agreements. So we can't, meaning HR, cannot change it without it being agreed to through the collective bargaining process.
Right, and I'm not thinking about changing everything that's in there. I'm thinking about moving forward how we behave as a county when it comes to classifying these. Should this be centralized in one place as opposed to in the hands of each department head?
Well, even when department heads or countywide elected officials come here and seek upgrade request, it still is always vetted through the Human Resource Department, always.
Okay.
But now we believe that we're going to have a more sophisticated tool to do just that, and that's on page 4 that I was referring to.
Okay, and any of the other questions that I have, obviously they're all subject to collective bargaining.
Yes.
We see we have a problem on one end, but we also see that we maybe do overcompensating on another. So in working with one, we might have to work with the other. Coming into this, I don't know why I was thinking this, but I was thinking if they found an employee that, say, was heavily overpaid for their position, we'd have to, wait for that particular employee to leave to fix the situation. But in fact, it isn't ever an individual employee. It's a classification, so the fix in it is entirely not going to be what was in my mind. It may be grandfathering, it may be whatever you negotiate. There's all sorts of things. So I don't really have a specific question. I just realized all the moving pieces changed from what my perception was of what they were going to be. Okay, thank you
Okay,
for
you're welcome.
coming
Thank
forward. Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. My questions are similar along the lines of Commissioner Dougier's about the number of classifications that we had 750. And do you have the number of total classifications? If we followed your recommendations, what would that number be?
Significantly less.
Well, how much? I mean, you got a number. What is the number?
I can get you the number. I don't have it right off the top of my head, but
This
yeah.
thing's an aggregate policy. We want to know what the significant
Well,
reduction
as
is.
an example, I could give you let's just take the clerical series. There were 32 titles there, and we've recommended 4. So
all right, okay.
it's not quite that prevalent with every job family, but
But
we are.
there's significance. There's a lot of significant consolidation. Good. Well, that makes it easier. It makes it easier
does.
and more fair for everyone.
It does.
There's too many classification people doing the same work, and they're hamstrung by the classification they're stuck with. The 4 pay grades, that's also another recommendation, 4 classifications.
4 structures.
Four structures. So with steps included in all those structures, right?
Yes.
And how many are there now?
There's over 30, I believe.
Okay. What's the value of, maybe in terms of percentage, how many of our positions are underpaid versus the average that you did with the study? How many are less than 100%?
I don't know the number right offhand, but I can get it for you.
Just curious to see what the scope
Sure.
of that is. And of course, it's going to be weighted because the positions are all over the place, but it does give us an idea of where we're at. You indicated the low and mid-range salary range are fairly comparable, but they're a little bit weak on the top end, so.
Right. And I do want to say that our analysis is on a position by position. So there may be many employees, even if their range is behind their actual pay, may have progressed enough to where it's okay. So I don't want everyone to think that just because a job titles range is behind, that means that everyone in that is going to get a 4% or a 15% or whatever type of increase is. It really does depend on how that data is used to position the position, if I can use that term, and then look at the actual individual employees and see how far they should have progressed into that range.
Well, that's right, because we've become so skewed off the track.
Yeah.
What was originally the intention when all this started back in the day, that positions are scattered all over the place with different price ranges. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Lucido.
Thank you. A lot of work obviously went into this, and we appreciate your presentation. And Amy, pouring over your 252 pages.
Actually,
Yeah,
I think it's
thank
more
you.
than that, but
More than that? Okay. That was a lot of work, and we appreciate it. As we move forward and you continue to have meetings and discuss it, as much as I love to read, maybe we could summarize what it is that the decisions that you're coming to and convey it to us moving forward. So, I mean, not that I won't sit and read through all those pages, but it's just nice to know what is going to come from those pages in your meeting. Okay, thank you.
Second round, Commissioner Gillette.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks. I hate to come back to this, but I feel like I have to. I wasn't here when the study was commissioned. A lot of us commissioners were not. But it would seem to me that it would serve us very well to have a comparison of total compensation as opposed to just salary. And is there any way, with the work that's already been done, in helping do some comparisons of that when tightening up this report or putting in the final report? I mean, compensation levels of benefits vary so widely. You know, some places might match on a retirement plan, and other places might not match an employee contribution. That can make a big difference. Or some may have a very low deductible for health care, and some very high deductible, or may cover family members that others don't. It's just a significant part of compensation that if we just look at salary, I think it's going to really kind of potentially distort what the market really is. You know, what people, they value more than just their pay, and that compensation is such a huge part of it. Is it too late to go back and incorporate that? And it'll be interesting to look and see the red and the blue and the black after those things have been factored in.
So the short answer to that is yes. It will cost money.
That'll be 359,000.
No, I mean the data has been. The other thing I do want to point out about a total comp analysis is because employees elect different options, they're at different ages and stages in their career here at the county. You'll have to bring in only specific data points that are applicable to the jobs that you're looking at. So, for example, when we do a total comp analysis, as an example, you typically take the most utilized healthcare plan and the option within that plan that is most utilized as your point of comparison for analysis. Does that make sense? So that you would know what the average pay is, because you don't know all the employees' options within that. So you're making assumptions about what most of the employees or the majority of employees are doing, and use that data point. Same thing with if you bring in leave, what is the average tenure of your employees, and use that level of leave accrual for analysis. So you will have some assumptions that are built into it, and I don't know if it will give you everything that you're looking for when you're trying to go to the table and determine how we want to implement this. But the short answer is yes, you can do something.
Okay. I realize that you make it sound complicated, probably because it is.
It is. It is. It is.
But you know, the work that you have done is complicated as well. And so, you know, I guess I just lament that we don't, you know, that path wasn't gone down for whatever reasons. You know, it would have been helpful to have that as part of our tool. But it's not to dismiss the difficult work that has been done, but really what we're trying to get at is, are people being adequately compensated, or undercompensated, or overcompensated? And pay is a big part of that, obviously. But you know, these benefits are also a very significant part. So thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say something real quick on that, and I don't see any other speakers, and that is, we're in the process of switching over from some benefits to other benefits, and so that also complicates figuring all of this out, because if we figure it out on the employees and the benefits they have today, and there's a turnover, it won't even remotely match. So that's another factor thrown into that. But I understand what you're saying. So seeing no other speakers, please vote on the receive and file. Isn't it? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you very much.